this. Not sure if you had this flavor before.
What the hell?
It's
Why'd you get
cumin
that?
lamb skewer.
Oh my goodness.
What?
That's pretty
Yes.
Wait, did you say human lamb skewer?
No,
Cumin.
cumin.
Oh.
The spiced cumin.
I was with just a hint of human. I
So
didn't
now we
know
know
that would be.
Gordon is into
By Lay's.
cannibalism.
Well, because it sounded like he
Confirmed.
said human. I mean, like, what the hell? That's an odd flavor if you think about it. But cannibalism, our new flavor of potato
Kids do
chips.
love that when we come back.
The Donner Party edition.
What's the weirdest Lay's chip flavors you guys ever had?
I don't know. Those sound pretty good.
There's no such thing. There's no
I-
such thing.
Actually, was really surprised when I went to Europe and I tried, as they pronounce it, paprika, not paprika, chips, and I was like, wait, this is just barbecue chips.
Yeah,
I
see,
thought it
that's
I thought it was gonna be this amazing different flavor, but no, it's just barbecue chips.
Crisps.
I think it's such a lie because that whole weird flavor thing. It's like that hint water, which is like hint, hint. Like there's nothing there. It's just a delivery system for potato chips. Okay.
All right.
Are we all working?
We're live.
think
We are
we're live,
working.
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All
We got
right.
everybody's on the chat.
Hey, everybody. Sorry, this
Tech
was.
potatoes first.
Oh, hey, yeah, Ian. Man.
Hey. Ian, yeah.
Hello, Ian.
Nice.
Here, I'm gonna tell you a secret. What it's like when you work in media is you go in the morning and say, "Oh, I better read what Ian wrote," and so I can see if I missed anything or understand it. So that's my secret. Actually, I used to always show up at briefings that I'd be late. It's like, well, damn, what happened? That actually kind of works because then people tell you what happened and you don't have to go through the marketing stuff. But anyway, sorry we're a little late. This was a last minute kind of thrown together thing. We weren't sure we were going to do it, but there's such a crap load of news today, obviously all from Intel. We're going to be talking about Alder Lake and ARC. I just can't call it XEHPG because it just makes my brain break for about, I don't know,
God,
4
acronyms
seconds.
are the worst.
Yeah. No, so
They're
ARC
not even acronyms.
ARC is way more memorable. And unfortunately we have a meeting we all have to get to, so we are gonna have to cut you off right at about hard out at about 11, I think, right?
Yeah, 11
Okay.
Pacific.
Yep.
So, ready to do this?
All right. Ready to kick us off, Gordon?
In this episode of The Full Nerd, Intel Alder Lake and ARC. Full Nerd, I'm your host, Gordon Maung, with special guest Mark Hockman.
Good morning, everyone.
Not really special guest. He's a regular, almost a regular these days. And of course, everyone's favorite on getting good deals, Elaine Yee.
Hello.
I didn't write the correct notes. I got to make this up. And of course, running the vertical and horizontal is Willis.
Hey, everyone.
So obviously, the big news today is Intel's big reveal of Alder Lake,
Indeed.
as well as more details of its HEHPG, which is now better known as its ARC GPU. That's due early next year. Mark wrote our story on PCWorld.com. Go there and read that on Alder Lake. So I'm going to let him kick this off. I got a lot of questions. There's a lot of comments too. I have lots of comments too, and I do want to hear what Mark has to say because I haven't talked to him about it since all the news the last couple of days. So
Yeah, there was a lot of information that came out in the past couple of days. So Intel held its Intel Architecture Day, which actually stretched over a couple of days this week. And this was I guess what you call the architectural explanation of Alder Lake. I mean, they've talked about Alder Lake, announced it before last year. This is sort of the, okay, here's how it works type explanation. And we're going to get into a little bit more in speeds and feeds probably as we get closer to launch. We're probably expecting that to happen in October sometime. But for right now, this is just sort of how Intel typically rolls out their processors. So Alder Lake is what we expect to be a 12th gen core chip. They haven't actually formally announced that. It is the sort of second iteration of their hybrid architecture. The first version was Lakefield. That was in a Samsung laptop, really optimized for battery life, and the performance was poor to middling, I guess you'd say. Nothing to speak of, really. It was almost like a test chip. I don't know how many of these things they sold, but for Alder Lake, what Intel is talking about is saying, okay, first generation hybrid, the type of electric car that gas electric car that gets you to the gas station once every month. This is more along the lines of a Tesla or a Formula One car, where actually the hybrid architecture is used for that dramatic torque and acceleration that gets you out of the corners, which is, I think, a pretty good analogy. So Alder Lake is a combination of two cores then. We have the performance core, which is pretty typical of the traditional cores that we've seen and everything under the sun up through Rocket Lake right now. And we have this new efficiency core, which is designed for handling lower priority background tasks. It's not quite a background core because Intel is talking about even possibly running games on top of it. But again, it's sort of a lower priority core. And Alder Lake is going to be made up of several chips with different combinations of performance and efficiency cores. So we can go to, and we have a couple of slides here. I think we'll start out, if we don't have it up on the screen already, sort of slide number 1, where we're sort of just talking about the overview for Alder Lake and what it's hoping to accomplish. And maybe we can just jump even quickly to slide 2, which is sort of the overview of what it's going to offer. So essentially what we're talking about for Alder Lake is 3 designs: your typical desktop, your general mainstream laptop, and then your ultra mobile tablet. And Intel hasn't actually given those product names yet, so we don't know if these are Y or series or U series or anything of that sort, but we can sort of just use those for background references. So the desktop version will have up to 16 cores, and there will be 8 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores. And then you're going to go down to the mobile, sort of the general purpose mobile. We're going to have 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores. And then to the ultra mobile, we'll have 2 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores.
Can we move to slide 4, actually?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. All right. And so basically, we can talk a little bit about, and the way I structured my story was actually to talk about a little bit about what Alder Lake offered in general, and then sort of dive down into the nuts and bolts of the performance cores and the efficiency cores. So Alder Lake really is, and we'll have to see how this all plays out, but really a fairly significant revamp of the PC, because the first thing that we know about it, and Intel's confirmed it this week, and we knew about this to begin with, this has been leaked out, and I think there was a cooler manufacturer this week that sort of talked about sort of the socket. But we're talking about the LGA 1700 socket, which is a shift from the standard LGA 775 socket that's been used to date. And this is a larger socket, and we're also going to see apparently, the need for new coolers because of the larger size, and I think the through holes are different as well. So that's going to be, the combination of new sockets, new cooler. That's going to probably mean, new investment in new PCs, issues for DIY builders. Of course, we have that legacy of Franken PCs where you can carry over things, but Alder Lake sort of shifts all that. The other interesting thing that we have here is we have these 2 new standards that are going to be introduced with Alder Lake, or at least formally put into the market in Alder Lake. 2 things: memory as well as PCI Express. So memory, and you guys have talked about this, I think, in last week's Full Nerd, as a matter of fact. So we're seeing the introduction of DDR5, and Alder Lake's PHY actually supports 4 different types of memory modules. We have DDR4 3200, LPDDR4 X4266, as well as the DDR5 4800 and LPDDR5X modules. So I'm not exactly, and you probably help me straighten this particular thing out. I am not sure if you'll be able to, I don't think you'll be able to mix and match modules. I'm not entirely certain what the how much you'll be able to, what the performance benefits will be of DDR5 over DDR4. But, this is essentially feeding the beast with higher memory. So
Yeah, I do want to point out this too. It's interesting. Ian, who's Tech Potato and probably in the chat because he loves to just nerd out over stuff, writes for a non-tech. He pointed out that in Alder Lake desktop, it'll be interesting because basically it's all hot. Um,
it is.
Typically, like Rocket Lake and Comet Lake and all previous chips, even though the memory controller on the mobile version might have supported LP, these parts actually support the desktop parts didn't. This one it does, and it's possible. I mean, somebody would have to be. I don't know. I honestly don't know why anybody would do it, but somebody could make a desktop board with embedded, LP memory if they
That's
wanted
true.
to, right? So
Yeah.
that's a little strange, but yeah, I don't. It's just. It's also interesting. I kind of wonder if this lets maybe we will see combo motherboards. It's been discussed, I think, heavily whether motherboard makers will make DDR4 with DDR5 because DDR5 will be so hard to get. Maybe that will happen. I mean, if everything is just basically switched on from Intel and it's up to
Yeah.
the board
You
maker.
mentioned hot too. This is also manufactured in the Intel 7 process, which is that new name for Intel 10 nanometer superfin technology. So, essentially, Intel has sort of characterized this as the equivalent of the 7 nanometer processor used by AMD. So, again, it's
Right.
they're sort of abstracting this. So I'm not sure, it's fun to argue about and talk about, but we'll have to sort of see how the performance just shakes out.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So, anyways, we've got we have the new socket, we have the new memory modules, we also have PCI Express 5 showing up here, which is sort of was expected, I guess, almost last year, but now because of possibly delays and just the getting the market and the pandemic, we're seeing this coming to market now. So looks like excuse me, 64 gigabytes per second across 16 lanes. And what Intel showed, and I'm not sure if this is indicative of the final product, but this is what they showed. They showed us by 16 PCIe Gen 5 as well as a by 4 connection to PCIe Gen 4. So that'll be excuse me, the latter would be for SSDs. Okay, so that is, sorry, let's go ahead and look briefly at slide 4, because that shows a little bit more how all the building blocks, excuse me, frog in my throat today, how all the building blocks go together. And, I think that what we see here is, if you look closely, we see that Thunderbolt 4 appears in the mobile and ultra mobile, not on the desktop. And we also see a lower number of EUs for the integrated Z core appear on the desktop versus the mobile and the ultra mobile. And though this might be obvious to some of you, Intel is simply expecting that on the desktop, we're going to see a little bit more presence of discrete graphics. Therefore, they're going to go ahead and shave off some of that die and essentially just assume that you're going to be running a discrete graphics card, which might be, ARC, I suppose. I'm not sure exactly what they're assuming here, but that might be just sort of an incentive for you to just to push into that ARC generation.
It's also actually pretty modular too.
It is pretty modular. Yeah, they refer to these things as building blocks.
It's a little. I mean, I guess it makes sense for desktop in some ways, but it's still a bummer to me that you don't get Thunderbolt in the die itself.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out, because I mean, Thunderbolt has been, my assumption has been a pretty key technology for, say, video editing and so forth, that high speed I/O. So
yeah, I guess it makes sense though for mobile, because you do want it as a feature on mobile almost anytime you care about high speed out. But
right.
on a desktop you don't really need it, so why deal with putting it in the core if the motherboard maker decides they don't want to deal with the certification, because there is a delay in certifying it, so they don't want to deal with that. So why waste it when they can just do it discrete?
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing the slide shows too is it sort of gives you a hint as what we're talking about in a couple of minutes, which is the relative sizes of the performance and the efficiency cores. You're seeing those dark blue performance cores up at the top and the lighter blue efficiency cores. And yeah, those efficiency cores, there's about 4 efficiency cores that fit into the die space of a performance core, which is, obviously a cost savings, but also gives you a little bit of an idea of the relative performance of each. And again, we'll talk about that in a second.
But we're really looking at basically, I mean, obviously it's different because we have lower performance cores. Well, efficiency core, not lower performance. Excuse me. You're now looking at, so Intel can go and say we can sell you a 12 core,
Right,
a 14 core, or 16 core. Those are your choices on
Yep.
our consumer products, right?
They are, and I guess the question that one of the people, some people may be asking is, why don't we just have all performance cores? And that, I think, is, I mean, if you're looking at from an overall product perspective, that's Sapphire Rapids, which is the Xeon processor. That is all performance cores. But the question was asked, why shouldn't we have all performance cores, especially in the desktop where battery life just really isn't an issue? And Intel's response is that, sure, battery life isn't an issue, but thermals are. And so the efficiency cores there are designed to lower the overall power consumption of your PC and just make it a more efficient experience to begin with. So, you may not agree with that. Who knows? Maybe we'll see a Core i9 version of Alder Lake that is all performance cores just for that enthusiast audience. But, again, for right now, that's the answer they're giving.
Yeah, actually, I mean, because to me the big news was the efficiency core. Did we already do slide 3? The throughput performance. The blue,
sure. You want to talk about? Should we talk about the efficiency cores now?
Yeah, because I mean, to me, I think for desktop that was always the really, ever since Alder Lake kind of broke his rumors, a couple years ago. We're like, what? Why would you do Atom, right? Because Atom it's got a pretty terrible name attached to it, but it looks like this ain't your netbook's Atom, right?
No, it's not. I mean, Intel has usually used, even though we don't really talk about them, Intel's used code names for its CPU cores in addition to the actual chip itself. And so this is an Atom chip, and this is specifically the Gracemont core that they've talked about previously. And the difference really here, in addition, of course, to performance and power, is the fact that the performance cores have hyperthreading, Gracemont does not. So that's why you're seeing the sort of the discrepancy in the cores and threads at the sort of the macroscopic level. So Gracemont is essentially it's their fourth generation Atom chip. And what basically Intel is trying to position Gracemont as is they're trying to position it against Skylake, which is the sixth generation chip. Skylake could do everything you ask for in a PC. It could play some games, relative games at the time. It could handle whatever tasks you wanted to throw at, video and so forth. So what they're actually saying with the efficiency core is they're trying to position against Skylake, and they're doing it in a couple of different ways. So essentially, I guess 1-to-1, the E core, which is the efficiency core's shorthand, delivers 40% more performance than Skylake. And then from a space perspective, again, if you had looked at that previous diagram, you saw that sort of four efficiency cores fit into that space where one performance core is. Now, you can slice that a different way. You can put 4 E cores against 2 Skylake cores, which are running 4 threads, and then you get about 80% performance with less power. So what they're trying to simply establish is that if these efficiency cores offer more performance than Skylake, using less power in a smaller footprint, which is basically the nutshell quote that one of their designers basically said. And I think that it'll be interesting to see exactly how that plays out. I think as you pointed out, Gordon, from a power performance standpoint, Atom looks great on paper, but from an actual usability standpoint, it was, kind of bad.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's memory of netbooks and Atom, frankly, in iterations, all Cherry Trail's last time I think I ever touched one. It just never blew you away, right?
Right.
It always just felt like drag, like a 7-watt passively cooled, core Skylake Park felt like, oh, this is worlds faster than a Cherry Trail.
So can I ask a question? And I feel like it might be something other people are wondering too. Why should we be impressed that they're talking about something that can match Skylake. I
Mhm.
mean, like it's such an old architecture at this point. And I get the power efficiency angle for sure. But since we're talking about this from the perspective of desktop, like what are these cores going to be really handling that's going to make them impressive for what they do?
Yeah,
Go
you
ahead,
want to
Kevin.
go?
Sure.
No, I think it really, it's again, it's for all the background stuff. If you run a very modern OS, it's always doing tons and tons of house cleaning that always has to be put off. There are knobs being turned and things being done all the time in Windows. So these cores can handle a lot of that. These cores could handle, I mean, there's just so many things that if you think about it, you're just sort of wasting the resources of a higher performance core. So you have this low performance core, or God, I keep calling it that. This efficiency core that does it. Now you free up your P core to do all the good stuff. So it's the bench player. It's the bench player in the PC, which is actually very important. So, and I think to me, well, I don't know if we're getting too far down here, but to me, what it does is it does the stuff and it enables them to get to very high thread count in a fairly, without dealing with the power limits of going to sort of a true enthusiast HEDT class socket in a way.
And I think Skylake 2 is just a simple point of reference. Most people understand, because most people are more familiar with Skylake and core processors than anything else. Atom has a pretty negative reputation. So, the combination of the two, right? The familiarity with Skylake and the fact that we're talking about it in terms of core performance rather than Atom performance. I think it's a marketing spin, but I think it's a pretty good one as well.
Yeah, and one other thing I do want to add to is this is the one thing everybody has used against Intel.
Right.
Saying KB Lake is just Skylake, right? Coffee Lake is just Skylake. Comet Lake is just Skylake, right? It's just Skylake plus 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 plus. So in a lot of ways, yeah, I mean there are iterations of that, but that's sort of where it was because Skylake was a break from Broadwell. So I think that point is probably fair. I know I know where Elaine is coming from because everybody goes like, well, shouldn't you compare this to a Rocket Lake core? Why are you comparing it to Skylake? But I think it's the original of the series that I think is the what they would rationalize it as.
And just to, I guess, explain a little bit more about what the efficiency core is designed to do. It's essentially to handle these background tasks. Like I think they gave email syncing as one of these tasks. So things that don't necessarily demand a whole lot of performance. The other thing to talk about or to mention here, and it sort of straddles this and the thread director discussion we could have a little bit later, is that traditionally what happens is that foreground tasks are basically given priority in a PC. So like, for example, if you're watching this in your web browser, that's a foreground task and it's getting more resources than it would be if it was, say, sitting idle. One of the things that anything else that's not being sort of actively worked on would be typically sort of a background task. And I think what Intel is trying to do is simply say, okay, those background tasks could be assigned to traditional cores like we see on Rocket Lake, but you're powering those up and those take power. So if we can assign those to lower power, lower performance cores, you may not get essentially additional performance, but your PC just might be more efficient. You're using less power, and that's just an overall better experience. Now, again, whether you agree with that or not, that's just the way that they see it. That's the way they see it.
So we actually have a super chat that's kind of related to this. And
Sure.
Dan, I did see your super chat. I'll get to that in just a second. But VC Pastor gave us $5 and wants to know, will these cores then save Dell in California?
That's a Gordon question.
Yeah, no, I mean, efficiency is something all desktop supporters are going to have to deal with as we go forward. So I think that's way forward. Obviously, the Dell thing was they just had parts they had to move, so they couldn't sell them here, so they didn't. But yeah, it is something that if you think that desktops are going to continue to run unconstrained, that's not going to happen. That someone will come for us one day.
Right. I mean, they're talking about right now systems running from 9 watts in the tablets to 125 watts in the desktop. I mean, that's just a a guideline for right now. I'm sure it'll go up and down depending on how they want to position the technology. So, but yeah, that's a that's a great question.
So I actually have a follow-up question about these cores as well. So based on everything you two have been describing, it sounds like integration with the operating system is really going to be key then for how well this does. Oh yeah, I see Gordon with the little finger wave for audio listeners.
Yeah, no, it's just a good segue for Mark to talk
Should
about
we go
Thread
ahead?
Director.
Okay, well, should we talk about the performance core before we talk about Thread Director?
Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
let's talk about that. Okay, so yes, so hold your thought. Yes, we'll absolutely talk about
Okay, cool.
integration with the operating system in a second. So the performance core, which is the one that most people are probably going to be interested in, the P core, as we're calling it now, if you want to be cool. Essentially, this is the traditional core, just carried forward. This is we've gone now from Sunny Cove to Golden Cove is what the official code name is. And this is, of course, that's the performance core that's designed for pure speed, pure throughput, the whole works. Now, I will be honest. Intel went into quite a lot of detail on sort of the intricacies and nuts and bolts of what makes this particularly special. We have, this is something that we have to wrestle with in PCWorld, where we have to sort of say, okay, we have a very nerdy audience and we have a more general audience, and we sort of have to sort of draw the line between the two. So, Intel's talked about, some of the front end stuff and the thread decoders and stuff. But I would honestly have to recommend you go to someplace like a non-tech if you want that level of detail. I'm sure Ian's gone ahead and provided that. I can just tell you from a more general concept that these, Intel is essentially presenting this as a wider, deeper processor, able to handle more instructions and with some interesting little tweaks here and there to improve the performance. Couple of those that we called out were an enhanced power management system. Now, power management normally wouldn't be considered to be associated with performance, but Intel's telling us that it's previously been able to adjust the performance on the fly by sort of looking at heuristically at the demands of the thread and the application that's running. The reaction time previously was on the order of milliseconds, and now it's on the order of microseconds. So I guess it's an order of magnitude improvement. So the idea being that it should represent a higher level of clock performance for a particular application, just because I think the idea is it can mix and match performance with what the application is trying to do. In terms of actual performance, I mean, the big number that we're looking at here, and you'll see repeated elsewhere, is 19% performance at ISO frequency, which is a fancy name for simply saying that, hey, if you take a Rocket Lake core, the Cypress Cove, thank you, and you run that at a particular frequency, in this case 3.3 gigahertz, you're getting a 19% performance improvement scattered over a wide variety of benchmarks, everything from PC Mark to spec to just a number of different things. And honestly, if you look at the graph, there's some sharp improvements, sharp gains on one end, and a lot of little downward gains at the other end. I don't know if you can take anything away from that, but again, this is something that Gordon is going to have to test, and we'll have to just run against a number of benchmarks and just see what the actual performance might be.
Yeah, but I mean,
look,
there's some things up to 60%,
right. Mm-hmm.
And it looks a lot of is very impressive because 20% is 19% is right there, but it's also interesting. There's a few things on the far left of that graphic that shows you like, oh, it actually may underperform a Rocket Lake part, so. Right. That's interesting. I mean, there's definitely. I mean, they're saying they did say this is their biggest, change in x86 in what 10 years. I mean, they're actually calling this a fairly significant change for them.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, this is. No,
so fine. I guess it makes sense if you're going to run into a few things that kind of stink, but it's just amazing to me that you have Intel. You have spec. And then they also throw in everything from Web Expert to Crossmark to Geekbench. I was really kind of like, whoa, that's. I mean, it's interesting to me because Intel would never sort of admit that they would never take Geekbench seriously in the past. I kind of wonder if that's something that's changed, or I'm just surprised honestly to see that as one of their one of their test results are pushing.
Yeah, I was too, actually. I mean, normally you would expect them to sort of do a little bit more cherry picking, but if you throw every benchmark under the sun at it, I'm not sure exactly what you're necessarily saying out of all this, but I don't know. It's
well, it's popular.
Yeah.
I think the thing is, and I'm okay with Geekbench if used correctly, but I have applied correctly, but I was just surprised because but yeah, I mean that's 60. I'd love to see what's pushing that 50 and 60% higher performance, right? So
yeah, so am I. Yeah, and it's possible we're seeing some applications that maybe are being tuned for what they're doing specifically. AVX 512, AVX, and so forth.
not AVX 512.
Well, not AVX 512. Yes, exactly. So I was looking actually at the next thing I just wanted to briefly mention, which is we have a new set of instruction extensions called AMX, Advanced Matrix Extensions. It's not specifically for AI. So we're talking really about Intel's optimizing for existing benchmarks and existing applications, but also looking forward. And AI, remember of course that Alder Lake is a architecture that's designed from everything from tablets to the data center. So, AI is something that we really haven't seen too much of in the PC space. I mean, gosh, they talked about it in the context of Cortana and so forth, and we've seen what happened with that. So, AI is usually considered to be something that's more in the mobile space, where you have things like portrait mode for a picture, as well as the data center, where who knows what Google and Facebook are using it for to profile us and so forth. So yeah, it's been so yes, we have. Again, AMX, we have AI, but that's really up to Microsoft to make sense of it on the desktop, and so probably won't see a huge impact from that.
Well, hopefully, application, software developers actually support it. I mean, that's
to
me
true. And maybe we'll see something in
games. So.
We might see something in games that takes advantage of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we are seeing some impressive imaging apps based on it. So, but but I guess what kind of blows me away is AVX 512, which I mean, remember they were taking slings and arrows in AVX 512 right up to the last architecture day, right? The last time, that's when Linus Torvalds was like, the AVX 512 is a waste of time. And Intel was like, look, we can't not offer it on all of our parts.
Right.
We have a deal here. We got to offer it on data center, and for developers to support it, we offer everything from laptops to desktops to data center. We have to have a uniform instruction set for everybody, except on this one, because we're dumping it overboard. I mean, I was really kind of like, what? It is a little like you just went through this whole like contortion to say that AVX 512 is like we got to do this, and then for people who don't know, AVX 512 is actually inside of the Golden Cove cores, but they're fused off. They're basically turned off permanently, right? And the rationale was, well, the Gracemont cores, the E cores don't have it, the P cores have it. We can't have a situation where the P cores have it and the E cores don't. But I was sort of frank, and then the thing here's the kicker though is like Sapphire Rapids, the big bad server version that has AVX 512.
It does. Yep, that's right.
So I am a little color me confused. I just kind of wonder if they're just like, yeah, AVX 512 was just the appetizer to get you to AMX. We want you to support AMX, or I really would like to find out what exactly caused them to dump it after all that time. But
it was a little nitty gritty for me I could see myself getting into that, and I could see editors going, why are we bothering with this anyway? So I didn't even really dive into it. But yes, I certainly take your point. I mean,
no, I get it. It's just weird because AVX 512 is sort of given as the justification for it was a lot of the AI workloads because VNNI runs on this. I was like, actually VNNI is in the newer Alder Lake part, but it's on AMX, so we don't need the AVX 512. It's like 512 was just sort of like, I mean, what can you say, right? Everybody who was criticizing it turned out to sort of be right, because unless they bring it back in the future, maybe we haven't enabled it in the E cores yet. We'll do that later. I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, Intel's I guess putting a pin in it for right now, I guess is the way to phrase it. So.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yes, let's talk about a little bit about what Elena had mentioned earlier, and that's Thread Director, because that's a really interesting little bit there. So normally we don't really care about such things as like thread schedulers, because it's just not something that we deal with too much. I think Gordon, you've written about it a little bit before, but in general, that's one of the parts of, or the pieces of Windows that just kind of gets overlooked. And with Thread Director, this is actually a partnership with Microsoft that's designed specifically to allow Alder Lake to run within Windows 11, and we'll talk about that angle of it in just a second. But essentially, what's normally happens is that a thread scheduler will simply go ahead and assign, we'll go ahead and assign tasks to, like, for example, give a task to a certain core, like a foreground task to a high performance core. And in this case, what we're doing here is they're actually not only dividing up the threads between specific cores, but they're also dividing up the threads within specific cores on specific categories. So again, Intel is essentially looking at the tasks that you're running on your PC, things like video rendering or a game with streaming, and trying to decide whether that task belongs on the performance core or the efficiency core. And certain things I think are pretty obvious. I mean, games go on a performance core. Again, email syncing might go on an efficiency core. But the deal is that what happens when you sort of essentially are trying to split the difference, and what happens if you're running something and a higher demand application sort of comes into the flow. You're doing some video rendering, and then you all of a sudden decide you want to go ahead and play a game while that's happening. So Thread Director is what happens to sort of shift things back and forth. And again, it's not necessarily designed to give you, in a way, it's designed to give you better performance, but in a way, it's designed to make your PC more efficient. And I'm not entirely certain how we're going to see that manifest. It might just be that we'll see PCs that feel less laggy, that feel more performant, that feel that have a little bit more battery life because tasks are being assigned in a certain core. Now, the interesting thing is that, again, this is designed for Windows 11. And the question was, of course, so what happens on Windows 10? And Gordon, I think as you pointed out, the question in some sense is a moot one, because we're talking about the majority of people will be buying a Windows 11 PC,
Right.
Or sorry, they'll be buying an Alder Lake PC with Windows 11 running on top of it. That problem just sort of goes away by itself. But for those of people who are going to be trying to buy an Alder Lake PC, but maybe don't want to go ahead and upgrade to Windows 11 quite yet for whatever reason, the UI or whatever it might be, this is where it becomes interesting. And to be honest with you, it's one of the questions that Intel executives got hit with just over and over and over, because to be honest, and to be fair, the answers were good, but the answers weren't quite to the level of specificity that we are looking for. So what it seems to boil down to is this. On Windows 10 will support Alder Lake. And Windows 10 has what Intel's executives are referring to as hybrid goodness, where you can go ahead and support applications running on both cores. What it seems like Windows 11 might do is it might do a better job of dynamically moving those threads back and forth between the performance cores and the efficiency cores, especially when new applications sort of come into the fold, so to speak. I think that I'm just trying to see if there was a quote that really summarized it up, and there really isn't. We didn't quite get this sort of the definitive answer we're looking for, but I think the bottom line is that you're going to see, obviously, Alder Lake supported on Windows 10, but you're going to see some incremental benefits on Windows 11, and it's not clear what those are. And that's, again, that's not the definitive answer that I would want, and it's not the definitive answer that you would want, but that's about what we've got right now, I think.
Yeah, it's so early too, and there are, Microsoft was involved slightly in that in the briefing.
They were, right?
But there's third rails in the PC industry, and the biggest third rail is talking about Microsoft products before Microsoft wants you to talk about them.
Right.
So there isn't a lot, but I'm going to guess you're not going to get the best performance. But I still think there's a little too much focus on it, because you're not going to buy a laptop next year that features whatever an Alder Lake H is and get Windows 10. It's just not going to happen. I know people think that's going to happen, but that's not how it's ever worked before. Microsoft tells everybody to jump to the new OS, and everybody says, how high should we jump to the new OS? So you will see everybody immediately switch over to Windows 11 for new PCs once it's ready. So I don't think it's a big deal, but I mean, maybe for a DIY person, if you have a Windows 10 license and you build an Alder Lake box and you're running Windows 10, it might kind of stink. But for all we know, Microsoft will say, hey, Windows 11 free for all Windows 10 people. Then, what
The
would the
reason,
rationale be for sticking with Windows 10 at that point?
well, the reason for me that it's an interesting question too is the fact that we have Microsoft just hasn't held to its schedules in the past. I mean, first of all,
Yeah.
we have Windows Insider builds that are out right now, and thread direction is not part of those, at least explicitly. Okay, so when does Windows thread director actually ship? Well, they're talking about it will be. I mean, the official quote was it'll be incorporated in the upcoming Windows 11 release. Well, Windows 10 has gone on for what, 5 years? Windows 11 could go on for that as well. So does that mean that we're going to see thread director in Windows 11 at launch? Does that mean we're going to see it like next year? Does that mean it's going to be, I mean, God forbid it's going to be pushed out like Windows 10X was? I don't think that's going to happen. I think that's very unlikely. But, the timing of it's going to be interesting. So does that mean, it opens up some questions? I mean, could you buy an Alder Lake PC with Windows 11 and then see a performance boost, down the road if thread director is implemented?
And it'll be messy too, right? It'll be like, messy. It's like a Windows Vista Ready sticker is what it could be like. I know I brought up Vista, but
just tricking everyone, Gordon.
No, I mean, we've gone through transitions where like, oh, well, our CPU or our product will get better when the next release comes out. That will be out in 2 months. 6 months later, it's like, man, where is this? You're killing us, right? And that's happened to us many, many times. Yeah. And that actually would be a suck situation because if Alder Lake needs Windows 11 to really extract the best performance, and Windows 11 don't come out to summer of next year, that would be that would be bad, right? Because then now you've de-incentivized people from buying Alder Lake box.
Yeah, I mean, it may be we're making a mountain out of a molehill, but I mean, these things are all concerns that cropped up to me, and I mean, we can't answer those questions right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's real though. I mean, I think people are like, oh, you're just fretting, but you know what? This is like it's happened before, so it's happened many times before, in fact. So that is an actual real suck situation for Alder Lake if that does occur.
The other thing that kind of occurred to me too is that you always traditionally one of the things that was a big no-no in terms of Intel was say new architecture on a new process. Okay, we're not necessarily talking about that right now. But we are talking about a new, essentially, I guess, a quasi new software technology on top of a new processor too. So I mean, I was thinking to myself, okay, maybe this is just crazy, but what happens if there's a bug in thread director and you end up with a bunch of different threads all jammed up onto a single core? Is that likely to happen? I have no idea, but I was just thinking to myself, gee, we are talking about Microsoft and Intel working together and new architectures, and I was just like, man, I hope this doesn't go wrong, but I could, I'm just wondering about whether that would happen or not. So,
well, I mean, and that would definitely be the point of hand wringing, I would think, because there's always it is a big change. There's high risk, but I think Microsoft and Intel realize they really, really need a hybrid approach because M1 ain't no joke, right? Qualcomm, I wouldn't worry about Qualcomm, but Apple is no joke, and I think that they sort of they want to see a hybrid approach applied by more vendors to get the efficiencies that Apple is getting out of its M1 platform, right? So I think it's real, but
And I don't want to imply the scenarios I was suggesting were going to happen. I think they're very unlikely, but still, it was just a worry in my mind and a question.
Well, you're a journalist, Mark. You only all journalists worry about the worst case scenario. You immediately go to like, well, what if aliens land? Yeah. It's always you have to because, and I will say the reason why is because if you don't point out that this could go sideways,
it could.
And then if you don't say it, and then I'll tell you 8 months later, it's like, why didn't you say it didn't go sideways? Well, if I say sideways, you blame me for being pessimistic, and if I ignore it, then you're beating me up for never bringing it up. What?
That's right.
But it's real.
So that's essentially Alder Lake. I mean, the next the next shooter drop, I guess, will be on October 27th when we're going to see Intel Innovation, which is the new modern reboot of the Intel Developer Forum. I mean, this is essentially what they're bringing back all these old TV shows, right? And they're upgrading them. This is what they're doing with IDF. So
Oh,
that happens October 27th, and we ended Intel Architecture Day with like a personal appeal from Pat Gelsinger to show up, whether in person or virtually. So my guess is that we're going to see a bunch of Alder Lake systems out there, and maybe even a formal launch. So it's hard to say what's going to happen.
what's your feel on this? Overall, Mark. So after seeing the Alder Lake, more details, not just rumors. What do you feel? Because I'm actually pretty.
Right.
Go ahead.
It's interesting. I mean, you can't ignore the performance numbers. I mean, they're talking about just the performant core, superseding Rocket Lake, the efficiency cores being there. There are a lot of moving parts to this. We're seeing again this hybrid architecture going mainstream. We're going to be talking about ARC in a second. We're talking about Thread Director. We're talking about Windows 11. We're talking about new PCI Express. We're talking about new DDR5. We're talking about a new socket. I sort of led with the fact that this is going to sort of, change, dramatically change the PC platform. And I think it's going to. I think that the problem is right now is that we are in a time where change is tough. I mean, NVIDIA talked yesterday about, having GPU shortages through next year. We don't know anything about how Intel is going to be able to manufacture this. We don't know too much about whether Windows 11 comes out in time. There's a lot of things coalescing this fall with the PC and all these different technologies. So, I'm always worried about, all of those, some sort of cog, slipping and slowing the whole process down. It sounds very cool on paper. Again, if we're talking about cynicism, I'm a little worried about something not coming to market right on time and slowing everything up. But boy, I really want to see this vision realized. I mean, it seems pretty cool. That's of course within the Intel world. I mean, what AMD is talking about is going to be a different story altogether. But I don't know. I mean, I thought, I mean, this all sounds pretty cool, but I'm always a fan of cool technology, and cool technology doesn't always pan out in the real world. So I don't know what to think about it, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I will say again, I came away pleasantly surprised because I think Alder Lake will be very competitive with AMD's existing products. We'll see how it is with their stack parts soon, but
Yeah.
it sounds like this could make them competitive, especially sort of at that area where they've just never had that core density, that throughput, as they'd call it, which I feel better because those E cores are definitely more higher performance than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think what I was kind of like thinking is like, because I get it for U class, I get it for H class laptops, right? I never really understood it for desktops. It's like, because I think I even saw that in our chat. A lot of desktop people are like, give me all the performance I can get. And rather than saying, give me an Alder Lake H plus in a desktop, I think people really sort of said, why don't you give me a Sapphire Rapids Lite?
Mm-hmm,
I
right.
don't want 8 cores of Golden Cove. I want 10 cores, to get all there is. But I think I kind of understand, or at least we have to see when we get it. But I think I understand what they're saying is like, look, with Golden Core Cove, we really give you, realistically, everybody plays games on they're very lightly threaded. You really don't need more than 8 cores for games. You don't need more than 4 cores or 2 cores for most games. So we give you just awesome kick-ass performance on sort of like the really lightly threaded stuff that everybody uses in Office, in Chrome, in gaming, Photoshop. That's all about, lightly threaded. And then now if you're going to sit there and you're going to render all day, we can now give you more threads than the competition and potentially more performance by using these Grace-Mont cores, right? And they do all that, I think, in a socket they can maintain and a consumer part, because even for AMD 5950X, the 16 core part, they could go faster with that part, but the socket is the limit, right? They just
Right,
can't deliver
exactly.
this. Their power socket limited. So, like, in a way, this is like a way to cleverly give them, you know, as they were saying, we solve best of both worlds. We give you single-threaded performance, we give you multi-threaded performance in a fairly limited, package. So
Hmm.
power package. So I think it makes me feel better. Of course, we don't know till we actually get it.
Nope.
So
And we don't know necessarily. I mean, there may be some goodness hiding between Arc and Alder Lake too. I mean, we've already seen some what happens when you know manufacturers try to combine or integrate processors and graphics a little bit more to give you some special benefits. So, um,
Yeah,
I
and
guess maybe that's good.
actually,
Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say that's a good segue to Arc. But if there's questions, we should do this.
Well, we do have questions, so I wanted to jump in real quick. And actually, on Gordon's point there about DIY people and wanting all the performance, friend of the show, Vignesh commented, asking, is the performance and efficiency cores going to use less power than all the cores from A&D? Because otherwise, given that TDPs are pretty similar right now, like Vignesh was saying that if AMD's all big core solution uses pretty much the same power, they'd rather just have that.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't know. We'll have
I
to
don't either.
see when we get actual products. You would imagine that those efficiency cores will certainly give it way better idle performance. So, especially when tied with an ATX 12VO power supply, which that's why Intel's been pushing so hard for it. But I guess everybody's saying no to
Yeah, they really
ATX
painted
12VO.
those numbers in broad strokes. I think TDPs are actually going to have to wait for the announcements of the actual parts.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, it's a great question.
And also, kind of related to that, Adrian on YouTube wanted to know, really, what's the point of having these smaller cores if it takes 10 seconds on a performance core versus 30 seconds on efficiency core? Like, doesn't that kind of equal out in the end? That was the question that they had.
I think the idea is to tune it. It's so, I mean, clearly, because it's about the performance you get out of it. So let's be honest. If you have a 5950X here and an Alder Lake, part is up here with those cores, that's the only thing that really matters. And I think maybe that's how they're going to tune the clocks and the power for all the cores to be faster than the competition. And yeah, is it and again, remember, you're talking about more than Skylake performance in, with 80%, less power. So it's just extremely power efficient in a way. And again, this sort of gets back to the previous question. We don't know where the power will fall, but I imagine it's probably not that bad. I don't know. We'll have to see though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange situation because Intel has, on one hand, it has to position the efficiency cores as efficient. It has to position them as low power. But on the other hand, you run into the risk of saying there's bad cores and there's good cores. There's power cores and there's no power cores, and that's where you get the competitive space, especially with gamers. Oh, I don't want a crappy efficiency core. I just want all power performance cores. And so, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out. It may just be, again, that we just that Alder Lake performs very well no matter what cores it's running on, but it may just be that, yes, there's a backlash because AMD is going to quietly say, well, we offer all performance cores and that's what you want. So
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's a good marketing way they can market against it. But
right.
I guess, I mean, I know everybody thinks they need 16 cores for playing games, and they don't. But it just, to me, and I think what sort of solves is that thread director is, you've always got background tasks happening when when you're playing games. But so now the CPU basically can handle all those with less power. So now there's more power to throw at the performance cores, right? So the E cores handle the background task, and then the P core can then benefit from that because now it has a better power envelope because the E cores are so efficient. I don't know this. We sort of hope that they do their math and balance it right so they're better. But I sort of see that. I don't see it as a negative because, those core, the efficiency cores, because of the thread director, could lead to, better. Ultimately, if it's better performance, that's the only thing you care about. So.
All right. Got 2 super chats I've been holding. Thanks for your patience. And then we can move on to ARC. Mike Quinton from the show Mike Quinton gave us $35. Thank you so much. I wants to know, will app developers retro code apps to take advantage of the remapping, such as Office apps or games? Ooh, did we lose Mark?
I think we lost Mark.
Oh, Mark.
So as far as I understand it, previously, Mark is coming back. So previously, the OS handled like you go to this core, you go to this thread, you go here, you go here, you go here. Well, the OS, as we recall from the original Ryzen launch, wasn't that great at it. It's gotten better with Windows 11. It will get substantially better, and then also with Thread Director, because it's like, look, Thread Director is like, hey, we're gonna tell you need to go to. It's just like that person at the supermarket. You need to go to lane 4. You need to go to lane 5. So that they're gonna tell the OS, which is telling the application where to send threads. So it should, in theory, not need a whole lot of a new version in order just to work for. Because I think Thread Director would handle it itself by simply knowing P core, E core, or hyperthreaded. So they're basically it sends, the way it works, the hierarchy is it sends it to the P core. If it's high, it's like, whoa, this is important. You go here. It's like, oh, your Outlook, you're going to the efficiency core, right? Or you're just doing this Norton scan, you're going to a hyperthreaded core. So it should, in theory, possibly make things even more, smoother on a PC in a way.
All right. And then thanks again, Dan, for your patience. Dan McGuire gave us $2 super chat. Thank you so much. Question for Gordon. Alder Lake or M1? Had to ask.
You mean which is faster?
I don't know. It's kind of an open-ended question. To me, I would interpret that question as which one would you prefer? But I think it's open. You can interpret it how you choose.
I really had to make sure I did not ask that question. So after that after my disastrous joke with NVIDIA backfired on me, I decided I'm not asking that question anymore. And I will say nobody asked that question. I was pleasantly surprised that no one asked, is Alder Lake faster than M1? I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised. I'm going to go on a limb here. I'm going to say is going to be faster. So that's my prediction. So yeah, I would say, and it runs Windows on x86, not ARM Windows, which isn't really ARM.
All right.
I mean Windows.
All right.
Sorry, my connection bounced. I'm now on. So I'm ditching Comcast, and now I'm on T-Mobile's 5G. So we'll see how that plays.
Oh,
out.
holy smokes!
Yeah, exactly.
Comcast is everything we expect from years of cable training.
Absolutely, I love my Comcast, my monopolistic cable provider.
How about some GPU talk before we have to wrap up here?
Need to do that.
We got 22 minutes.
Yes, I'm going to go through this quickly. Fortunately, a lot of this stuff is deep GPU nerd stuff. I'm not a deep GPU nerd. Big deal, of course, is ARC. And I really will say I don't know why they just didn't simply rebrand. I mean, I get it. It's all based on XE HPG, XELP, which was in Tiger Lake, XEHPC, which is the big pants stuff. That's a big deal. That's the real money. Those are the high rollers. For gamers, you're going to get basically Intel Arc. They announced that this week. So it's the rationale for Arc is story arc. You go in a story, you go into the dungeon, you get killed, you come back out, you do some loot boxes. That's the whole story arc. So now Arc, the first of which GPU will be called the code name is Alchemist. So they got some cool code names too. So there's going to be Alchemists. It'll be, and they kept calling it Alchemist Arc. So the first Arc GPU you will be able to buy will be Alchemist. It will be a high-performance gaming XeHPG. Big changes from what you've seen in XE graphics in Tiger Lake 1. Well, No more EUs. Previously, they called everything EUs, execution units. There was 96 EUs in the top end Tiger Lake UP3 part. They're saying we're not going to call it that anymore. These things got too big and unwieldy to use that. We're going to call them XE cores. And there's 4 XE cores in a slice, and I believe the first Alchemist Arc will have what, 8? 8 slices? I've got to look at this. If we go to slide 10, you can sort of see it here. So slide 10, there's going to be 8 slices, each of them containing 4 XE cores. Also, there is indeed hardware ray tracing. I know, of course, because it's been coming for a long, long time. When Intel first sort of said they're going to do a consumer GPU, people are like, well, you're going to have hardware ray tracing, and they've never really said. And people said, you're going to need it to be competitive, even though no one believes in ray tracing. But they said they will have hardware ray tracing. It is a significant higher clock speed and also more efficient. I think they're saying over the XE graphics in a Tiger Lake UP3 part, it's 1.5x in clock increase and 1.5x in power efficiency per watt. They say that comes from the design, the architecture, and oh, by the way, this one is not on 10 nanometer. This is actually based on TSMC N6, which is what, their 6 nanometer? I don't even know what it is, just N6. It's their 6 nanometer process. So these GPUs will be built by TSMC. So they pick up efficiency there as well. Actual performance is not hinted at. It is because it is so far away, and that is, to me, is the most disappointing thing here. Alchemist Arc XE-HPG will not be available until Q1 2022, which is everywhere from January 1st out to the last day of the quarter for 3 months. That's pretty far away considering right now it's August 19th. So that to me is disappointing, but they showed a bunch of games running on it. Looked, on Silicon, you can go to our.
Oh no, really?
Oh no,
recorded. We lost Gordon.
Oh, the dangers of a Zoom podcast.
I thought it was me again. I was just like, that's what I
No.
said. Okay, well, I guess, the one thing that Z does for me is just, even though the fact that it's coming out next year is disappointing. The fact that we're going to see, ZHPG availability is obviously the thing that's going to matter. Whether it comes out from Intel's fabs or TSMC's fabs, it's simply just the fact that we're going to see a third-party GPU that's go ahead and supplements AMD and NVIDIA. I think it's going to be something that everyone's going to appreciate. And I think that as we've mentioned it before in the site, it doesn't really have to have leading edge performance. It just has a decent performance, so people can at least buy it, because that's going to get people onto the Intel graphics platform and basically allow people to play some games they haven't been able to play before, since they've been using their ancient graphics cards. And I think the one of the questions that we had before, of course, was are these GPU shortages going to alleviate from AMD and NVIDIA? And I think that with NVIDIA saying yesterday that no, that we are going to see some GPU shortages throughout next year, that really smooths the landing. It basically just enables Intel to come to market with a product, and it's going to get a warmer reception than it might normally would have. People are not going to necessarily dismiss it. So.
Yeah, but here's the question I have regarding that though, Mark, because what all of this is being manufactured by TSMC, right?
I think so.
So in some ways, like everyone's going to be constrained to a certain degree. So even if NVIDIA is saying they're going to experience chip shortages, does that really mean that there's going to be that much of a big window for Intel to step through? Do you know what I mean? Just because everybody's facing these shortages, right?
Yeah, good question. That's that's an excellent point. You're right. You're talking about just slicing a fixed supply, but I guess it really depends upon what the contracts are between NVIDIA and TSMC and Intel and TSMC.
Yeah.
Maybe Intel was able to negotiate some priority pricing just because of some sort of reciprocal agreement that I might be able to make in the future. I don't know. It's all speculation, but you're right. It's a great point. But I guess it allows Intel to get in the market. One of the questions I had, it's a shame that Gordon's dropped off for the
He's
moment.
rebooting right now. He says he'll be
Yeah.
back.
Okay. Great. Is what Intel's response to DLSS 2.0, where it's talking about the upscaling from 1080p to 4K. And Intel calls this, I guess, ZSS is how we're going to pronounce it. I'm hopefully Gordon will be able to come back on and sort of a question to answer this. But so his story says that ZSS uses machine learning and temporal feedback techniques. So I'm wondering if that's being done in real time or if that's been done by Intel separately, sort of accumulating sort of a database of these things, of the performance to sort of influence the driver. And I haven't actually I've watched the Intel demonstration of the technology in terms of how it's upscaling, but I'd be interested to know how that's going to actually work in reality. But
That's kind of the big question in general, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
Like we just don't know a lot.
No, we don't. And again, I think that's what we're going to see maybe this October. I mean, hopefully. I mean, the thing is that it seems sort of pithy to say that yes, this Delta variant stinks, but I mean, this is the kind of thing that with the new architecture you want to see in person. And if Intel has demonstration systems, both with Alder Lake and Arc, it's a chance to take it for a spin, to see how it plays, to see if there's not just frame rates, but see how choppy it is, in terms of, playing a first person shooter or something of that sort. So,
yeah,
hopefully at some point we'll be able to go ahead and play with this before it actually comes on.
and it'll give us a better idea of where they're actually going to land, right? Because they really haven't given much indication of like where they're in the stack, so to speak, they're targeting relative to the competition. And I think
we have an idea that they're sort of going to be somewhat behind both AMD and Intel, but
we just don't know how much, right?
Yeah,
and we just don't know like what that's going to look like in terms of, as you said, like tangible in-person feel.
Mm-hmm.
Gordon's back.
Hey, sorry, yeah. Boy, we are just, this is why it's nice to be in the studio. We'll do that soon.
So we were just
chat. We're thinking
about,
Comcast pull the plug on you or Apple.
Yeah. So basically, so it's coming. We don't really know much. We don't own a performance. The other thing is, did you guys mention XESS?
We talked a little bit about it, but I didn't know exactly how it worked. Do you have any more insights upon how the machine learning and so forth actually operates?
Well, there's, if we go to slide 12, so they give a little bit of a glimpse into how XESS works. Hopefully, we can get an expert on from Intel to explain it soon enough to us. But they do say it, it does use, machine learning to neural nets to basically do the sample, the upsampling, upsizing. And you can see this if we go to slide 13. They actually have quite a few demos that you can look at. We actually have one attached to the story that I wrote about it today. It does look pretty impressive to me. So, they say, I think they say near the almost imperceptible, I think, or near imperceptible. Basically, it looks pretty damn good is what they're saying. Basically rendering frames at 1080p and then upsampling it to 4K. A lot of the stuff looked impressive that I saw. It is, of course, using the goodness inside of the new Arc GPUs to do the upsampling. But, they do recognize that in order to play this game, you have to be open. So they are going to release, after the initial version, there will be a version that also runs on products that support DP4A, which is basically most modern GPUs from NVIDIA and AMD. So, because part of the game is you don't get developers to support your fancy new feature unless they can use it in more places. That's why AMD's done so well with FSR. So with XeSS, you get this awesome goodness with the Arc GPU, but if you have a GeForce or you have a Radeon, you can also extract something as well. They're not saying how good it will be, but they're saying it won't be as good, no surprise, but you can at least run it. So that is a nice thing about XeXS.
This is the area where I would expect them to have a little bit more tighter integration between the CPU and the GPU going forward. I would be surprised if they didn't offload some of this to the CPU, or at least more tightly integrate. Because I know it's bundling, but in some sense, I don't know. It just seems like that might be an area where something can take place.
I think it's too early to. For me, I would if I were to read the temperature of the room, I would say that would be too soon.
Not now. No, I'm talking about future products.
Oh, yeah. And down the road, yeah, it's clear that AMD and Intel are going to exploit the ownership of both parts of it to push out. The leader in this market in GPUs is NVIDIA, right? They own 80% or more of desktop, and for laptops, they own probably 99.9% of it.
Yeah, so of course we could see an ARM processor PC with an NVIDIA GPU attached to it. So we'll see.
Yeah. But I do think Intel will do that eventually, and AMD as well. But I do think they have to be extremely careful to tiptoe around the improvements. You don't want to seem like you're just pushing NVIDIA overboard and forcing consumers to buy their products. They have to say, like, look, we'll work with their stuff, but if you use our stuff, it's so much better. And I think PC gamers will accept that. If they sort of accept, like, hey, we got this feature and you have to use our GPU and our CPU, people are really going to balk at that, I think. So it's just, we're just so used to the openness of PCIe. It's the Casablanca of the PC for gaming. So you can't really, you can't break that right immediately without having the benefits being so overwhelmingly good that people will do it. And I do think if the benefits were that overwhelmingly good, then you should make that decision. Like, yeah, I like this. But then you weigh it against, like, I may want to buy an NVIDIA or an AMD GPU down the road, or vice versa, right? So we'll see.
So on this topic, Gordon, we have a $5 super chat from Victor Martinez. Thank you very much. Do any of you guys think that maybe NVIDIA will make DLSS available to every GPU now with XeSS as competition? Or do you think they're still going to keep that locked?
I think, with the pattern we've seen NVIDIA in the past is, you know what, there's enough pressure. We're sort of losing this battle. We do need to do, we need to adopt basically XeSS and FSR, but then call it DLSS, DLXS alpha or something like that. That'd be the NVIDIA move, right? Look, now we support DLSS. Like, what? That's AMD's and Intel's thing. No, it's our thing. Okay, yeah, sure. I think there is that possibility. I don't think they feel they're there yet. And then also the thing is they don't give up. Real GeForce hardware monitors are indeed the cream of the crop of gaming monitors, and they are not giving that up. But I do think at some point they do have to. They are going to have to do it if AMD and Intel make more headway against them and increasingly isolate them.
Yeah, Santino Joshua Torre on YouTube says, of course, NVIDIA is going to call it DLSS Lite.
Of course, DLSS compatible. Oh, it's DLSS compatible. That would be the way to do it. And you know what? I respect the ability for them to do that. They can pivot, and I don't even know what a FreeSync monitor anymore. They're just G-Sync compatible now. So it's incredibly impressive.
My life's so hard when I'm looking at deals. I'm like, is this really a G-Sync monitor?
Yeah. So yeah, no, I think Arc is really looking, honestly, like a real player. I really wish they would have launched it this year, though, because, oh man, February and March, that's a long ways away. You don't know what's going to happen. So right now they'd have an instant hit. I think it very much depends on what it's going to look like next year, so this is their moment, and sometimes it feels like that window could close. So you need to get that out ASAP right now to make an impression. So I wrote this story. Go to PCWorld.com, wrote about it, and it's really sort of the things I think Intel has to do with ARC to make it a winner. One I think is don't bundle it. I mean, definitely don't bundle it. Try that right now. I think the game for Intel is to get the mind share. Oh, you love us. You may have hated our Rocket Lake part, and you may have hated our 14 nanometer parts, but our GPUs are awesome. So we're your best friend now, and why not exploit that? And I just can't. Why not just mess with AMD and Nvidia when you got that chance? It's not your core business. You got nothing to lose. Like just wreck it. Like sell these things for like $180
I
for
was gonna
3070
say
performance.
they drop the price low enough, nobody's gonna complain, really.
Yeah,
hmm
That was AMD's playbook when they got back in the CPU game,
yeah. Give it away.
pretty much. Yeah. Well, we're getting close to the end of the show. Any last thoughts before I do a couple last super chats and then we wrap up?
No, I mean, I overall, I think it was a really a good showing for Intel. I mean, you didn't come away going what besides the AVX 512 thing. I mean, everything is like, yeah, okay. I'm very optimistic for Alder Lake, frankly. And
Mhm.
ARC, of course, everybody is like, oh my God, ARC can't get here soon enough, right? So
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the only takeaway that came to mind right now was just a procedural one. I kind of like the way that companies are doing it now with. I almost like pre-recorded broadcasts the way that things are doing now. I remember when we used to go to Intel Architectural Days, they were all live, and just taking notes and processing that information was a real challenge. But honestly, the way that Intel did it, where this is behind the scenes stuff, I guess, but where they had presentations that were pre-recorded, but they also had opportunities to ask questions of live people, just like you guys are doing to us now. That's the way to do it. I mean, it's like taking a college course or something of that sort. You can review the lecture, and then you can go ahead and have office hours and ask questions of the professor. So that was, if there's anything that I took away from the pandemic, I think I did like the way that this was handled. I know, sorry, probably a little too meta for most people, but that was what came to mind.
Hey, Intel's listening, then maybe they'll take into
Yeah.
consideration, right?
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, a couple things. First off, yes, thank you, chat. I was wrong. NVIDIA is now with Samsung, not TSMC, but I still do have the same question about the whole global shortage of supply and all that. I think that's something we'll have to keep an eye on to see if it affects Intel's ability to bring enough to market. And then we got a couple of super chats from the show VC Pester. So first one is $5 and wanted to let you know, Gordon, that his 5950X and he and his 5950X will fight the M1 for you as your champion. He's got you, bruh.
oh, good. Because I don't know, it might be faster the M1, but
And then a second $5 super chat. Thank you. Just throwing money at us today. Wanted to know, Gordon, when you popped offline by accident, did you run to your neighbor's house, kick down the door, say that you needed 200 feet of Cat 6 stat? Is that how you solved the problem?
yeah, I don't know what happened. I ended up having to something with his laptop just kind of like freaked out. So
I think he probably found it underneath an overpass, like he found the PC. Someone just tossed
Oh
it,
yeah.
gave it away.
Apple heard
I
you.
looked. I was walking through San Francisco and I saw some abandoned computer outside a bank, and I had to look. It's like, because you think, oh, maybe I'm gonna score another one. It was like a dual Xeon rack server. So
This is gonna be Gordon's thing from now on. Like, once you have that first hit, right? Like he's not gonna be able to stop scavenging PCs from the side of the road now.
I just, that was it. That was just, that was a 980, a 980, a 980 and a 1080. Come on.
Yeah.
that's just-
So, and for people who don't know what we're talking about, there's an article in PC World where Gordon details his I don't even call it dumpster diving. It's just sidewalk scavenges. It's a pretty amazing story. So go and
Yeah.
check that out there. But we got to go, unfortunately. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. Gordon, why don't you take us out?
Oh, if I could find my notes, I got totally discombobulated. Check back next week for your fix of PC talk on the Full Nerd. For audio listeners, subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or Stitcher. And also, please leave a review on one of the services. Every time you do, Intel turns off another AVX 512. Please send questions and comments to thefullnerd@PCWorld.com. Thanks for coming. I'm Gordon Young with Brad. No, Brad's not here. My notes are old. With Mark Hockman,
Thanks, guys.
Eleni Yee,
Bye, everyone.
and thank you to Willis for turning off the light switch.
Thank you, everyone. Be sure to check out Mark and Gordon's article in the description below. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we'll catch you on your next show. Bye.
Bye, everyone.